There were those who saw her only as someone strong and organized, but no one imagined the silent burden she carried. After years of building a stable life, a single event left her adrift, forcing her to face the void that settled where there once were certainties. Now, as she tries to catch her breath amidst losses, responsibilities, and lonely nights, an unexpected encounter threatens to turn everything upside down, and nothing will be simple, obvious, or predictable. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Madison had always been known for her quiet strength. Not a strength that was displayed, but one that grew inside, formed by the small scars of someone who fought more than spoke. At 32, she had a life many respected. She lived alone, supported herself comfortably, held a position of trust in the architecture firm where she worked, and walked with steady steps, even though her heart sometimes trembled behind the unshakable appearance. The one-bedroom apartment she had managed to buy after years of saving was her fortress. Small but cozy, with plants she tended religiously every morning before leaving for work. The white walls displayed paintings she had made herself during painting classes she took to de-stress, as she told her friends. In truth, painting was her way of talking to herself when words failed. She moved to the big city 8 years earlier to study and work, overcoming a modest reality that said little about who she really was. Coming from a simple family in the countryside, Madison learned early on that dreams required sacrifices. While her college classmates in architecture went out to parties, she divided her time between studies and a part-time job in a coffee shop. What mattered was the present, and all she had achieved through effort. But March of that year broke her in a way even she couldn't understand. The date would remain etched in her memory. March 17th, a rainy Thursday. Damien, the man with whom she had shared 4 years of her life, the one she planned to marry, who spoke of the future with a kind of conviction that calmed, asked her to talk in a way that was too serious for an ordinary late afternoon. Damien was a civil engineer, and they had met during a joint project between their firms. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile that contrasted with his thoughtful eyes. He was the kind of man who made notes on napkins when he had ideas, and kept small mementos of important moments, a habit Madison found charming. He had a thin scar above his right eyebrow, a result of a childhood bicycle fall, and he would often touch it when he was nervous. Madison, used to his light humour, thought it would be another joke when he asked her to meet at the cafe where they had their first date, but it wasn't. The rain tapped against the window as Damien gripped the coffee cup harder than necessary. "I received an offer to work on a project in another country," he said, eyes fixed on the drink that was cooling down. "It's the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime." She believed they could withstand the distance, but he was straightforward. He believed the relationship wouldn't survive, and thought it better to end it there before the pain grew greater later on. "It would be unfair to both of us, Madison. I don't know when I would return, if I would return." Madison listened without being able to respond. She was confused, devastated, not knowing how someone could end 4 years just like that. The plants they had bought together for her apartment, the plans for the next year, the conversations about which neighborhood they would choose to live in when they got married, all evaporated on a rainy March afternoon. In the following days, she tried to return to normality, but there was a heavy silence in everything. The left side of the sofa, where Damien used to sit when they would watch their suspense films, became an abyss. His clothes that were still in her drawer were returned in an unceremonious box, left at his building's reception when she knew he would be at work. The months that followed were like walking through a dark room. Her friends took turns helping her, filling her with small joys to prevent her from falling apart, yet every night alone was a descent. The longing came like a tide, and the memory of the interrupted future was like a persistent echo. Julia, her best friend since college, appeared unannounced with food and movies. Sophia brought breakfast on weekends and dragged her on walks in the park. Even with all this support, Madison immersed herself in work as a refuge, taking on extra projects that kept her busy until late at night. When December arrived, Madison was emotionally preparing to return to her parents' house for Christmas. Her family had always been her safe harbor, and she needed that simple affection, that embrace that questioned nothing. She had already bought the gifts, a watch for her father, who collected antique pieces, a shawl for her mother, who always felt cold even on the hottest days, and for her younger brother, a book on photography, his new passion. She had even set aside the outfit she would wear on Christmas Eve, a dark green dress she had bought especially for the occasion. But 20 days before the trip, Diana, her boss, called her for a private conversation. The Hamilton project, one of the largest the office had ever taken on, was in trouble. The client had requested significant changes that needed to be implemented by the end of the year. As the team leader, Madison would need to stay in the city to resolve the issue that had arisen in the sector. "I know you had plans for Christmas, but we have no other option. You are the only one who knows the project thoroughly," Diana explained, genuinely troubled to have to ask this. Madison swallowed her frustration. There was no choice. It was her position, her responsibility, her adult life. She called her parents that same night, explaining the situation. Her mother, always understanding, tried to hide the disappointment in her voice, but Madison knew that tone well. "Don't worry, dear. We understand that your job is important. We'll save a slice of the walnut cake for when you come to visit us." The walnut cake was a family tradition, a recipe from her grandmother that her mother only made at Christmas. Madison felt a knot in her throat when she hung up the phone. 2 weeks later, still trying to accept that she would spend Christmas alone, Julia showed up at her apartment unannounced, holding a bottle of wine and a determined smile. "I have an idea," she announced, as she poured 2 glasses. "Remember my friend Ryan from the marketing department? He has a friend named Brandon who's also going to be alone on Christmas. He just moved to the city and doesn't know many people. I thought maybe you two could have dinner together, you know? Nothing romantic, just company, so neither of you spends the night alone." Madison refused immediately. She had no interest in meeting anyone. Her heart was still aching, and the idea of getting involved with a stranger seemed absurd. "It's not a date, Madison. It's just dinner with another person who also doesn't have anywhere to go. Better than staying here staring at the walls, don't you think? Besides, he seems like a nice guy, works in software development, likes classical music, has a cat named Einstein." After so many months trying to survive her own silence, Madison agreed. It wouldn't hurt to try to make the evening less bitter. What did she have to lose? At most, it would be a boring dinner with a stranger. In the best scenario, perhaps she would meet someone with whom she could talk about something other than her broken heart. On the night of the 24th, she dressed simply. Dark jeans, a navy blue blouse that her mother said matched her eyes, and comfortable black boots. It wasn't a date. It wasn't something that required effort. She called her family before leaving, heard their warm voices wishing her a Merry Christmas, imagined the bountiful table, the typical smell of celebrations, the laughter mixed with soft music. Her chest tightened, but she smiled as best as she could. "I miss you too. I promised to make up for it on New Year's," she said, holding back tears. The restaurant was cozy, lit by a yellow light that seemed to want to calm those who entered. Small Christmas trees decorated the corners, and wreaths hung on the walls, creating a festive atmosphere without exaggeration. The man her friend had introduced was named Brandon Keller. He had a calm face, short brown hair, and thin-rimmed glasses. He wore a plaid shirt and seemed too restless, always checking his phone. "Sorry for being late," he said, standing up to greet her when she arrived. The traffic was terrible. Madison tried to make light conversation, just to get through the evening, but he seemed distracted, offering only quick answers about his work and how he was adjusting to the city. She began to believe that perhaps he too had been pushed into that dinner. "So you have a cat named Einstein?" Madison asked, trying to find some common ground. "Oh yes," Brandon replied, checking his cell phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. "He's a good cat." After 15 minutes of going back and forth between the plate and the phone, Brandon received a call. He answered quickly, stood up without explaining anything, and went outside to take the call. Madison sat, watching the door close behind him. A discomfort ran through her body. Who abandons someone at dinner, especially at a dinner where the other person clearly didn't want to be? She took a deep breath, thinking that maybe he really had some urgent problem to solve. Minutes passed, and Madison began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. Around her, couples and families were celebrating, sharing smiles and gifts. She was about to ask for the bill when the waiter approached with a neutral expression. He placed a folded note next to her plate and withdrew without a word. Madison felt her heart race. She unfolded the note. The handwriting was familiar, marked by firm letters that her heart recognized without permission. "Go to the terrace. You will understand everything." The floor seemed to shift for an instant. It was as if her heart had forgotten how to beat. That handwriting, she would recognize it anywhere. It was the same that left little notes on her fridge, reminding her to buy coffee or simply saying, "Have a good day." The same that sketched out imaginary house plans on napkins when they would daydream about the future. She stood up slowly, like someone afraid of waking from a strange dream. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her bag. She walked down the narrow hallway leading to the restaurant's terrace, feeling the air grow colder as she approached the door. She pushed it gently, as if the world might tear at the touch of her hands. The terrace was almost deserted, except for a delicately decorated table, illuminated by small candles dancing in the wind. White flowers adorned the center, and 2 plates awaited, as if the evening had been lovingly prepared. Christmas lights wrapped around the terrace railing, creating a soft glow against the dark sky. Madison felt her whole body shudder. Beside the table, standing with an expression that mixed regret and courage, was Damien. He looked different, thinner, with an unshaven beard and subtle dark circles betraying sleepless nights. But the eyes were the same, and the impact of seeing him there was devastating. Madison didn't understand anything. Confusion filled her chest before any clear emotion could surface. "Hi," he said, his voice almost a whisper that the wind nearly carried away. He approached with slow steps, maintaining a respectful distance. There were no words there, just the mute intensity of someone battling their own memories. Damien seemed willing to face everything. Madison felt her throat burn. Part of her wanted to run, part wanted to scream, part wanted to embrace him, but nothing moved beyond her short breaths. "Sorry for the theatrics," he continued, running his hand over the scar above his eyebrow, the nervous gesture she knew so well. "Brandon is my cousin. He agreed to help me." He made a gentle gesture toward the table, making it clear that he didn't want to pressure her into anything other than a dinner. Madison stood firm. She didn't want to discuss the past on Christmas Day, not in such a carefully prepared setting. His expression said that he knew this, that he wasn't there to hurt her. He just wanted to make sure she didn't spend the night alone. "How did you know I would be here?" she finally managed to ask, her voice steadier than she expected. "Julia," he admitted. "When I came back 3 weeks ago, I looked for her. I wanted to know how you were doing. She told me you would be alone on Christmas because of work and that she was trying to find you some company for Christmas. The rest was improvisation." Madison took a deep breath, trying to process everything. There was something as unexpected as it was painful about this reunion. Damien didn't try to hide how much he had suffered since March. He seemed quieter, as one who had learned about losses in a cruel way. The months away from her had been too long. He confessed with his gaze that he hadn't spent a single minute without thinking about her. "You didn't have to leave like that," she finally said, releasing words she had been holding onto for months. "We could have tried." "I know," he replied, his voice breaking slightly. "It was the biggest mistake of my life, Madison. I thought I was protecting us both from inevitable suffering, but I ended up causing more pain than I ever imagined possible." Madison sat down, hesitant. The dinner unfolded in a warm silence, without demands. Just 2 hearts that still knew how to recognize each other. As much as she tried to convince herself that she had already gotten over it, she realized that she never truly had. Damien talked about the past months, how the work, which seemed so promising, became empty without her to share the achievements. How he woke up every morning with the feeling that he had left something essential behind. How he finally realized that no professional opportunity was worth the price of losing her. "Would you take me back?" he asked as the dessert was served, apple pie with cinnamon, her favorite. "If you take me back, I'll resign and come back immediately." Madison, with eyes full of tears, replied, "I'm very hurt. Right now I need to heal my wounds." In the following days, Damien remained in the city. He no longer had the urgency to return to the other country. He seemed willing to rebuild everything from the beginning. They started seeing each other frequently, talking about the things they hadn't said before, about the fear he had of the distance, about the interrupted plans. A coffee after work, a Sunday lunch, a walk through the park where they used to spend Saturday afternoons. Each meeting was a brick rebuilding what had crumbled. It wasn't the same as before. It was deeper, more conscious, more true. Madison, with all the honesty that had always guided her, spoke about the resignation he had suggested that night. She said she couldn't bear that responsibility. She didn't want him to give up something so significant because of her. She couldn't be the reason for anyone giving up a dream. Damien, however, was already prepared. The day after the Christmas dinner, even before knowing whether she would take him back or not, he had sent in his paperwork requesting to be relieved from his job abroad. He didn't do it to please her, but because he realized on his own that his place wasn't far away. The future didn't make sense without her in it. It was a decision that freed him, and he seemed finally at peace. "I realized that the real dream wasn't a prestigious job on the other side of the ocean," he explained as they walked through the snow-covered park the following week. "It was building a life by your side." Madison was silent at this revelation, feeling the weight and the lightness of that gesture. It wasn't a desperate proof of love. It was a mature, definitive decision, made by someone who finally knew who he was and what he wanted. Days later, as they walked through the park near her house, the cold wind touching her face, Madison took the initiative she had feared for so many months. She stopped, turned to him, and approached slowly. The first kiss since he had returned happened like a natural surrender, not to the pain, but to the love that had never ceased to exist. It was a kiss that sealed not the return to what they were, but the beginning of what they could become. Their lives continued with a newfound calm, without rush, without abrupt expectations. Madison felt her own strength returning, this time more serene. Damien seemed genuinely willing to rebuild everything with patience. He was no longer a man in conflict with himself. He had chosen to stay, not out of obligation, but with certainty. The following Christmas, together at her parents' house, sharing the famous walnut cake and exchanging knowing glances, Madison realized that sometimes we need to lose something precious to understand its true value, and that when life decides to give a second chance, it comes not as a repetition, but as an evolution. And there, in that mutual choice, something stronger than before was born, a conscious, mature second chance, free from the illusions that destroyed the first. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.